Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Thank you for being with us once again. This is Jesus 101, and we are in our series on David that we have called After God's Heart. Now, I'm holding something very, very, very special. It's special to me, but I'm sure it would be special to you too. This is a little stone that we picked up from the actual brook that runs in the valley of Elah, where David fought Goliath. And you know, there's nothing else there. It's like a dry brook. So it's pretty much the only brook where he could have gotten the stones. And this is so special to me, not just because it was the actual place, but because we all face giants in our lives. They might not look like Goliath, but definitely they're giants. So this little special stone reminds me that at some point in our lives, we will have to face giants. And today I have some toys with me, but they're not going to be toys for this story. They're going to be the things that David remembered when he had to face his giant. This is a lion and this is a bear. And he had to face Goliath. And he said, you know, God has been with me in the past. When I had to fight the lion and the bear, God delivered me. Therefore, I know he will do it again. I'm wondering, which ones are the lions and the bears in your life? Because the truth is, we do have things that have happened in the past that assure us that God is going to be with us in the present and in the future. So which one is your lion and which one is your bear? I could tell you mine, but we're not going to spend time on that. We're going to spend time on how David had to face one of the greatest battles in his life, probably the most known about in the Bible, with just a stone from that brook, and God gave him the victory. So come with me to study this very, very famous battle between David and Goliath, but we want to go a little deeper today to understand how does it help us when we have to face our giants, and for sure you'll have to face one day, maybe more than one. And once again, we want to welcome Pastor Mike Tucker. Thanks for being here, Mike.
It is my pleasure.
It is always great to have you, not only because you're funny, but you're also...
Are you speaking of my looks?
Funny looking?
Yeah, funny looking.
No, you're insightful, you have humor, and you make a lot of fun of my accent, so we have to have...
There's just so much material you've given me.
You know what happened today?
Yeah.
I have to tell you, before we started the show, he must have laughed for 5 minutes when I told him that Siri, in the iPhone, doesn't understand me.
I thought that's hilarious. You're on your own phone, it doesn't. Would you try that again?
Well,
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, I think they have to work on Siri a little bit more, so that...
Yes, it's Siri's fault, isn't it?
It is Siri's fault. Supposedly, they're supposed to,
Yes.
be able to understand
accents. That's right. Yeah.
I mean, when you do your Texan accent, they wouldn't be able to...
She understands that completely.
Well, maybe she has a lot of rehearsed, words.
Maybe.
Well, today we are talking about this great challenge, and David is chosen by God to face this great giant, much bigger than himself, definitely more trained than himself.
Oh, yeah. David had no training.
No training.
None whatsoever. I mean,
he's a shepherd.
He's a kid with a slingshot. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and a harp.
Yeah, and a harp.
And some sheep.
And a bunch of sheep. So he's had no battle training, and Goliath has trained all of his life.
All of his life.
He was designated for this. So he was huge, and so obviously became a champion.
Yeah.
And was an intimidating force, a well-trained soldier against a kid.
So it's a soldier, well-trained, on top of that pretty big, with pretty great equipment.
Yeah.
It's like nobody stood a chance, right?
No.
Let's look at the background of this story. The main story is on 1 Samuel chapter 17. That's where we find the story. And let's talk a little bit about who the Philistines were, because as soon as we start chapter 17:1, it says the Philistines gathered against the armies of Israel. So who were these people?
These were people who were a constant thorn in the flesh of Israel. You see
They
them
were.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
They fought more against the Philistines than anybody else. In
Yeah.
fact, basically, I've even heard religious people now, when talking about people not in the church, would refer to
the
them as a Philistine. Yeah,
I heard that
which
too.
obviously is.
Yeah, it's not true. Yeah, the Philistines were called the people of the sea. They started being a power around 1200 BC. They were, as you said, very well trained warriors, and they came to Israel, and it says that there was a champion. Let's read this if you have it in your iPhone. By the way, he's not just answering calls; he's actually
I'm texting.
yeah, he's reading the Bible.
Yeah.
So let's read verses 1 and 2, and then verse 4.
There's so many words that are hard to pronounce here in
Well,
1 and 2.
don't
But
worry
here we
about
go.
that,
But the Philistines gathered their army for battle, and they were gathered at Succoth, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Succoth and Azekah in Ephes Damin.
Okay.
That was, it's a reasonable facsimile of the correct pronunciation.
Exactly.
And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the
Valley of Elah. This is important
yeah.
because we're going to show you in a moment. Our team was able to go to the Valley of Elah, and that's where we got the little stone, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big valley, and these two, Succoth and Azekah, are like two towns in the opposite ends of the valley. So verse 4.
Well, we skip down to 4?
Yeah.
Okay, and there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span.
Okay, so we have a champion. Why did they send one soldier out to taunt?
It was not an uncommon occurrence in battles of that day when the armies would line up as they're getting ready for battle to send out a champion, our champion versus your champion. And of course, a lot of trash talk went along with that as well. You'll be our slaves, we'll be your slaves, that sort of thing.
And as a matter of fact, the champion came in the name of their gods. And it wasn't just, okay, I'm bigger than you're smaller.
Yeah.
Our God,
My God
is stronger than your God, right? So here we have a champion. The size that we're given 6 cubits and a half or a span.
A cubit is about 18 inches roughly.
Yeah, so this would be about 9.5 feet.
Yeah, that's a big guy.
It's a big guy, but don't forget that Saul also had a champion. Israel had a champion, which was King Saul.
He was head and shoulders above everybody else.
Right, so maybe
he
he
should
wasn't
be the guy.
Maybe he wasn't 9 feet, but he might have been 7.5 or 7. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah, but he's terrified. He's hiding, and this champion is taunting them for 40 days. So this is a very interesting number, and if you keep reading this, you will see that he keeps doing that for 40 days. And verse 16 is actually where it says that if you have a if you can scroll down.
There we go. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening.
Yes, and so we have here, 40 days is a very interesting period of time in the Bible. It's a period of time where God will give the chance to people to see if they will trust that he will give the deliverance.
Yeah. Well, even 40, the number 40, you got 40 years of wandering in the
40,
wilderness. You got the 40 days a night that Jesus is in the wilderness in prayer, fasting.
Exactly.
You've got this.
You have the 40 days of the flood. You have the 40 days of the spies in Israel, for which the 40 years came from.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of 40s, and 40s is a period where God will offer his deliverance and see if you will trust him with it. So these are very important numbers in the whole Bible, not just here. So one day, David shows up, and what is so interesting is that this man from Gath, this Philistine, we are told in detail everything about him, not only his height, but look at verse 5 and 6. It says he had a bronze helmet on his head, and we're told how much he weighed. So let's do 5 and 6 and 7.
All right, it says he had a helmet of bronze on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had a bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. Someone else had to carry the shield.
Yeah, and look at this man. So you're going to be Goliath just because you're older and meaner.
Older, meaner, bigger. Yes. So I get, and of course you would get David, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I will get David because he's nicer. No, look at this. I mean, if we're going to compare, which is what Saul is going to do. See, your sword is bigger, it weighs more, your breastplate weighs more, all
Yeah.
of it. And even when Saul tries to give David, that looks good on you. I think
It
you
looks
should
like
wear
what
it
I
for
bought
the
my grandson for Christmas. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's
he's into
better
the
than if
stories
your
of the
grandson
Bible.
bought it for you.
No.
That's better the other way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were all focusing on how big everything was about Goliath. This man is big. He weighs so much. Look at the helmet. He's so strong. He's so trained. And so David shows up with a different talk. And he starts talking about God. He doesn't talk about Goliath. And somebody, by the way, I have to give credit where credit is due. About 15 years ago, I read, 15 or 13 years ago, I read a book by Max Lucado called Facing Your Giants, which I highly recommend. And there's a couple of things here that I have adapted from the chapter on the fight between Goliath and David. But he talks about the ratio of 5 to 1. Everybody's talking about Goliath, how big he is, how much he weighs, this and that. And David shows up talking about who God is. Why is this man taunting the God of Israel and the armies of Israel? And he's not focusing. Isn't it something that wherever you focus?
That becomes big. When you look at your problem, the longer you look at it, the bigger it gets. You may start off as a molehill, but the more you look at this thing, it becomes Mount Everest. Yes,
it's and that's
huge.
what happens in this chapter. They're all talking about Goliath, and it says in verse 10 and 11 that even Saul is terrified.
Yeah, he's hiding.
He's hiding, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to tell you something about what we just said. Probably one of the greatest advices I ever gotten about this topic was somebody that told me, look, that which you give energy to, you will empower. That which you give energy to in your thoughts, you will empower. So in the morning, choose which side of reality you're going to empower.
Right,
because if you're thinking of
defeat,
yes,
fear,
how big the giants
yes,
You
you have the opportunity now to make a change in your life. You're basically one choice away from a better life, and just changing the way you think is one of the keys to that. One of the things you do as a counselor is you help people reframe. Their experiences. All right, this is a bad experience, but let's reframe this. Let's look at this in a different light. And sometimes that exercise alone helps them put things in perspective.
The worldview changes.
Absolutely.
I saw this firsthand with my mother going through cancer. She could not change her circumstances, and she had cancer for 7 years. Some of those years were difficult, and there was something about her that she would start every morning with a Thanksgiving. I mean, I admired that. I still do. I mean, she's no longer with us, but she could find something to be thankful for and happy for every single day, even at the end when the tumors in her lungs were breaking her ribs. And you would say, well, that's so much pain that nobody could find something to be helpful. Somehow her worldview was, I am so thankful I'm still alive. I'm so thankful I see your new house. I'm so thankful that, it was amazing.
I've worked as a hospice chaplain, and there were times when I'd go into a home expecting to have to encourage or cheer up a patient. But when that faith was strong, I left there encouraged.
Wow.
Because even though they were in pain and they knew death was imminent, their faith was so strong it encouraged me. And I saw that in my own wife as she was facing death. Her faith was strong, and even though she had a series of strokes brought about by liver cancer, which was spread from the pancreatic cancer, and so those strokes eventually took away her eyesight. They took away her ability to distinguish touch. She couldn't tell the difference between a wool sweater and a silk scarf by touch. All of that was taken away from her, and yet her spirit was positive. And that's, again, because she made a decision, like your mother and like the other cancer patients I've talked about as a hospice chaplain. She made a decision about where to put her focus, and it was on the goodness of God and His strength and His ability.
Thanks for sharing that. I don't think I've ever seen your wife sad.
No.
Even in difficult times, she still had a smile on her face.
Yes.
So what a gift she is.
She was my rock. She was constant. I'm up, I'm down, I'm over here.
You're like
but
David,
she was
but she was like...
happy was this, sad was this.
No, she was constant. It was amazing. So going back to the story of David, he goes and Saul is trying to say, look, at least take my sword, at least take this. You will have at least something. It's not as big as... And so David said, look,
He was even too little for that stuff.
Yeah, he was like, this doesn't fit me.
Yeah.
And I love that because a lot of people try to fit in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
And they're going, I want to do what they're doing exactly like they're doing it. And they're trying to put the armor on like.
But you have to fight in your own armor.
You got to find your own armor, even if the armor is 5 stones.
Yeah.
You got to do your thing in your style because God has gifted you, our audience, with a very special way of doing things. And
Yes,
you can't say, oh no, I have to be exactly like Mike. Don't try to be like Mike, but you know.
Please.
No, just kidding. Be
Aim
like
higher.
Mike. Yeah. No, we all. It happens that we, for a while, until we find our identity, we're saying, I want to be like him. I want to be like her.
And you know, it can be helpful to have someone like that you
a model,
that
a role model.
A role model, but you have to realize you're not going to be that person.
No, because
you
God
may
has
do some
given
of the
you-
same things, have the same
Exactly.
attitudes, but using your own armor.
Exactly.
Doing it in your own way.
I think that's very important too to point out.
It is, and I think once you do that, you place your confidence in God, and the results can be amazing.
Exactly.
But only in your own armor.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. So now, David said, look, I have some past experiences, and I got to show you this. This is so cute.
Yeah.
Isn't this cute? This is cute. I collect precious moments just in case anybody wants to ever send me a gift. And I have many of them. And this is the first gift my husband gave me when we started dating.
Well, that's a good thing to keep.
Yeah, now I have many of them, but this is very special to me because this is David the shepherd, and it says, it has the verses here that he said on 1 Samuel 17, 34 and 35. Your Majesty, David said, I take care of my father's sheep. Anytime a lion or a bear carries off a lamb, I go after it, attack it, and rescue the lamb. And if the lion or bear turns on me, I grab it. And he was saying, I'll take care of you. That was really cute. But the truth is, David, like we said before, had a past experience with God. And he said, I know he will deliver me. So I'm going to go just the way I am. And he went and faced the giant.
Yes, he did.
Now, before you had to go through this experience that you just shared with your wife passing away so young, you had other experiences that reminded you that God was with you, even in the most difficult, and that kept you going, right?
It did. When you realize that you've gone through difficult times in the past and God saw you through that and you've benefited from the experience, you've learned from it, and you've survived, you realize that this is something you're going to survive as well. There are days and moments when you wonder if that's true, but you keep remembering that this is the same God who's seen you through the difficult times of the past, and he will do the same thing today.
Yeah.
That has been a comfort for my family. One of the most encouraging things that has happened through this experience is someone told one of my daughters, oh, you don't know how the death of your mother will change. Your whole family will change, and you'll be at each other's throat. It happened with my family. It happens with everyone. And my daughter said, no, that's not what my family does. We have gone through difficult times in the past. We don't do that to each other. It will bring us closer. And that's exactly what it did. But when I heard her say that, I realized that she was echoing the words of her mother, who would instruct the girls by saying, this is not what our family does. Our family has chosen to do this. And they have an identity of who we are as a family, and recognizing that God's deliverance in our past will provide it in the future. And this experience has brought us even closer.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how you had to rely on each other as your wife passed away. So going back here, David is going to face the giant. And I told you that I have taken some adaptations from Max Lucado's book, Facing Your Giants. He has, because as you know, he picked up 5 stones from the brook. And he has 5 things that start with P. And I didn't choose exactly the same words, but 2 or 3 of them are the same. But 5 things that I have 5 stones here, and I wrote them. You don't need to be able to see them in the camera. But 5 things that it might help you to remember that David did with that allowed him to face the giant. So we're going to do these 5 words, and you'll remember the 5 stones that way. The first thing we just talked about, the past. So the first thing that David did said, hey, look, God has been with me in the past. He's going to be with me again.
Kill the lion.
So, exactly. The second thing, he said a prophecy, which is very interesting that he decided God is going to do this with me, and he's going to deliver me. And so verse 46, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David does a prophecy as he's facing the giant. He does a prophecy. He doesn't
This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead body of the host of Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that the earth may know that there is a God in Israel.
So he makes a prophecy before. He hasn't started the battle. He says, I know, you're dressed all nicely or whatever.
You look nice too, by the way, but you're going down.
Exactly. So he made a prophecy. So he had the past. He made a prophecy. Now let's do the next one. Is what power he came with. Verse 45.
45. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied.
Yeah, it's very interesting because he doesn't come and says, hey, look, I know how to work a sling.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the power I have.
You've never seen a sling like this, buddy.
Exactly, and he was very good at it, right?
Yeah.
No, he said, I'm coming to you in the name of, and the actual Hebrew is Yahweh Sebaoth, which is the Lord of the armies, which is more than 240 times in the Old Testament. This is a powerful name that says, God is in charge of this army, and I'm coming with the power of Yahweh Sebaoth. It is the Lord of the armies, even the heavenly armies, not just on earth, right? And so that was the power that he was coming with. The next one is the priority that David had. It wasn't just to set the record straight for himself. He had the priority of everybody, and you just read it, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. That was his priority, the name of God. Right. And the last one is the passion. Look at verse 18.
Back up to 18.
Okay. I'm sorry. The iPhone is the issue. Yeah. Verse 48.
48. All right, we'll go back the other direction. Here we go.
Sorry about that.
When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine.
He ran towards the giant.
Yeah. Saul was cowering, running away, and David's running
towards him.
Yeah.
Now, we want you to experience this, and so we're going to take you right now to the very valley of Elah in Israel, where we were, so that you can experience the beautiful geography there, but also what it meant that this David and the champion met in that valley.
Welcome, please. Welcome.
Worlds apart from the hustle and bustle of the busy Jerusalem streets, yet only 25 miles southwest lies the sleepy Valley of Elah. It's hard to believe that this agricultural valley, surrounded by hills, trees, and beautiful wildflowers, was once the site of perhaps the most famous battle of all time. For it was here that David fought Goliath with just a sling and 5 smooth stones. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they camped between Soka on the southeast side of the valley and Azekah on the west. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines, called Goliath. Now David took his stick in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his pouch, and he approached the Philistine. Now Goliath fought on behalf of the Philistines, and David fought on behalf of the Israelites.
Now, this is a very important point because theologically, David obviously was preceded Christ, but Christ was in the line of David. Also, we believe in the representative model of fighting, like Jesus fought for us and he won in our place. So it's very similar to what David did here in the valley, it's just that Jesus did it spiritually for the whole human race. So this representative battle is very important, that each part would send a representative and they would fight each other. So here's where Israel actually won through David, because he came in the name of the Lord of hosts. So here we are at the brook that is believed to be the place where David would have picked up the stones to fight Goliath right here in this valley. So right now is a dry little riverbed, but it's actually filled with little stones. Well, it's pretty emotional for me to be standing right here thinking he picked up this stones and God delivered Israel through something that they never imagined, just a boy with a lot of faith who chose faith over fear. So it's not by sword and it's not by javelin, it's by the Spirit of God that things happen. And this is a beautiful brook right here to remind us of that the simplest thing in God's hand is powerful. I hope you enjoyed that. It was quite emotional for me to be there standing.
I would imagine, yeah.
At the very valley.
But watching the video reminded me of the fact that he picked up 5 smooth stones. I always thought, well, he was thinking, well, if he misses once, he's got more. But that's really not what was on his mind. Because later in Scripture, we find out that Goliath had 4 brothers.
I love it.
Isn't that wonderful? He said, one of these has got your name on it, Goliath. But if those other 4 guys want a piece of me, I got one for each one of them as well. They're going down 2. I got 1 for them.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, one of the points that I talked about in the video, I think is very important. This type of battle through representatives, it was very used in the ancient Near East and also in Egypt, that you would send your best
Set out your champion.
Yeah. And the truth is, the Bible says that this is the reason why we can be sure of our salvation, because our representative has won. As a matter of fact, we have it in several scriptures. One of them is Romans chapter 5, verses 18 and 19. Then as the one transgression resulted in condemnation for all men, talking about Adam, our representative, our first one, everybody sinned because of Adam sinned. Even that through one act of righteousness, talking about the cross, there resulted justification of life to all men. So people say, how can it be that I can be sure of my salvation when I believe in Jesus Christ? Well, it's not because you're a good warrior or because you have all the right tools. It's because you have a representative who has won on your behalf.
Our champion is the best champion ever. He has fought the battle on our behalf. We do not have to fight the battle. We are to stand still and see the victory that the Lord has won.
Yeah, and maybe that's why so many people don't live with the assurance of their salvation, because they're looking at themselves and they're going, I need a bigger sword, I need more armor, and God says, relax, I have won, I got this. So, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
Were you going to say something else?
No, go for it. Go for
okay,
it.
Well, then we're going to head to the cross, and I have a little heart here where my stones were in, just to remind us that I think one of the main reasons why David was a man after God's own heart was because he came to believe that it wasn't him doing things, that it was the Lord of hosts, the Lord of the armies of heaven that was with him. And this is very important because Jesus obviously would be in the line of David, and he fought for us, as we just discussed. So you can relax, even when you're facing giants. You know how the story ends and Jesus wins. So don't so much talk about the size of your giants. Talk to your giants about the size of your God. Because the truth is, you already know how the story ends, and Jesus wins.